Hello and welcome to another MegaMek tutorial, and today we're doing a much sought after tutorial to map editing, uh, and we have our co-host here today, a special guest star co-host who's laughing at me in the background. Who have we got on then?
Hello, it's Simon Landmine. I was more laughing at the much requested aspect of the map editing tutorial because that's not the first time I've heard that.
It is a black art, and I did one for 46.1 about a week before I found out that the map editor in what at the time 47 was different. So let's make this clear to start off with.
Mm.
This is a map editor tutorial for current 47.16, but I am pretty certain that between now and the new release candidate, which is going to release probably not in the next couple of weeks, but soon, it's not going to change hugely again. There was a huge change between 46.1, which is the current stable build, and the 47 generation, and a huge change for the better, and it makes it really, really usable. But we're going to really go from scratch, and I've opened the map editor here, and you open it from the MegaMek splash screen. So in the MegaMek splash screen, you just basically click on map editor. And you launch straight into this. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just show you, because it isn't clear, and I think this is one feature I'd love them to add, to how to just bring up a blank map. Because this is an auto-generated map. It just auto-generates one for you. So I'm just going to click new. And it's a bit of a faff to do this, because you have to basically follow through the settings. Sorry, my Windows spawned on my other monitor. There we go. You have to go through, unless you know a better way, I don't know a better way to do this, to go through and change all of these to none.
To make it flat.
To make it flat. So we're going to start with a completely featureless terrain set so that we can... Yep, go ahead, Simon.
Once you've had the fun of changing all of these to none, you can shortcut it for future stuff by clicking on the apply and save option down at the bottom.
Yeah, and I'd realised that, but I've always been too lazy to do it.
Because then you can save the configuration set, which will save the randomizing options you've picked from the drop downs. It doesn't save the board size, so you can then use that set of newly saved flat random options to any new board to build just to make yourself a nice flat board. And it's really handy then. So the other option is to do what I usually do, which is what you're doing now, and just go through.
So it's not like me and too lazy to save. You just go through and select everything to none. And then we're going to talk a bit about... we won't touch the advanced ones. This is just for random map generations, and I'm not really going to talk about that now. We're going to talk about the board sizes. So 16 by 17 is your standard Battletech map. We're going to do 32 by 17. So the first number is the horizontal, and the second number is the vertical. And there's lots of course, advantages of MegaMek. One of the advantages is you can have truly epically huge maps. Now, my biggest was, we're comparing size, here we go, 64 by 68 is the biggest one I've done. And that was great for aerospace, because you can really nip around on that map. But in a normal kind of game, 32 by 17, or the other common one, 32 by 34, is really good. But you don't need to stick to those. You can have any square you want. You can't do anything that's not a square, obviously, but or a rectangle.
What one tip is to be aware of is that in the past is when you're picking the width of the map, go for an even number. In the past, there have been issues with the map if you went for an uneven width in hexes, so 33 or something weird like that. And then if you do use the reverse map function in the lobby, which flips the map upside down, it doesn't know what to do with an odd number, because obviously all the rows are out of alignment, which means that every other row gets misaligned. So if you want your maps to be flippable, I'd recommend making sure you've got an even width we have discovered that the hard way.
And being a traditionalist tabletop player, I've always do my maps in multiples of map sheets because I'm just obsessive
So
compulsive
do I
like that.
No, and also because map sheets are used as the measurement for things like artillery and so on. It just it works with my head as well. I tend to do 32 34s, 64 68s, and I've done some 16 17s as well. But yeah, it's
Yeah, 16 by 51 is an interesting one for doing breakthrough missions, where you're doing that
I
very, very long thin map where you've got. We did that recently with a canyon mission. I think one of our Battle of 2 Kid Online ones is one of those.
yeah. Yes, I saw your replay on that one. That was messy,
Yes.
entertaining but messy. The I have done, and I was kicking myself. I did a bunch of 30 by 15 maps that tessellate to form a long valley for sort of breakthrough type missions, and they can you can change the order of them and so on. And if I'd thought about it, they would have been 32 by 17 rather than 30 by 15. So I'm kicking myself slightly about that one, but I've done too many of them now to go back and change them all.
Yeah, a quick point to say about this: if you're making maps and you want to make a series of maps that you can use interchangeably, then making them 16 by 17 is good because then you can add them together. But you can add together any two maps in MegaMek itself as long as they're the same dimensions, using the map tool, which I won't show today, but that's quite useful if you want to put two 32 by 17 maps together to make a 32 by 34 or the other way around. That's possible. So you click OK here. The other two things then, if you want to save that profile, and again it says show map editor at startup. That's just basically this, which can be a useful thing actually. Just kicking into this so you can set it to the default settings. So click OK, and instantly I've just got a blank canvas here. The minimap's not that necessary if you're doing a map like this, but if you're doing like a huge map, then it's very useful to work out your way around. I'm going to zoom out here. I'm going to do it manually because I've disabled the mouse setting. One thing that kept driving me mad, because I've got a magic mouse, is I would keep accidentally scrolling in and out of the map. But usually you can scroll in and out of the map using the mouse wheel. So I thought we'd start with the simplest thing, which is going to be the terrain, which is often the question people get most answered to. Sorry, the height of terrain. So if you look down in this height setting here, I don't know why it's set to -13. I must have had it on something before. So it's usually set to 0 by default. And if you have got a map like this, just think what sort of thing you want. So we're going to go for a couple of different features. We're going to go for a river running down the middle. We're going to go for some low hills, and we're going to go for different foliages and a small kind of settlement, just to show you the majority of stuff. And then maybe we'll do some fun like the fuel tanks, because they're always fun.
The considerations when you start making a map. The first one obviously is what are you intending this map to be used for? Now, something like a 32 by 17, you're going to get a lot of use. It's a decent size for a lot of stuff, so you probably want something that's fairly generic, like the basic BattleTech maps. But if you're building something for a scenario, you're going to probably have a brief or an idea in line, like say a river down the middle and some hills, or you do what I occasionally do, which is when I do something that looks more realistic and is therefore completely impossible to fight on. So I'd recommend going for something that's more playable.
And a little tip as well, and we'll show you this right at the end, so just a thing, because I'll have to kick out the MegaMek, is you can go into MegaMek, pick any maps you want, put them together, and then save them inside MegaMek to a new board, and then come back to the map editor and edit them.
Yes.
And that's really, really useful. So I've been doing that a lot by taking two maps together, because the big problem when you're playing BattleTech is you put two maps together and there's this lovely area right down the middle with no terrain. So it's always good in the editor to go back and change that. So we're going to start with... Go ahead.
That's one of the other considerations if you're making maps that you intend to tessellate and put together to make a bigger one, is what do you do at the edges? And it's why Stuart mentions all of the 16 by 17 sort of official map sheets have that flat edge, the blank border, so that they don't look weird if you put them next to another map,
And
which
interestingly,
also has a flat edge.
interestingly, the Battle of 2K broke from that. It's the first set to actually break
Yes.
from that, which then makes it a problem if you want to integrate other maps with it. So we've got 3 brush tools here. We've got change single hex, change 7 hexes in a 1 radius, and then we've got a large brush in a 2 radius. So they're very useful for doing this initial part. But I'll just show you with one first. Now the important thing is this little tool tip up here. So there are various. The only way, if I just click now to change terrain, it doesn't work. And this is where people go, "Oh my god, I don't understand how this works," and that confuses people. Like if I just click around, I don't get any terrain. Because to change terrain height, and I always forget which one it is, you've got to hold down Control.
Control.
Yeah, and you've got to hold down Control to get any terrain height. And it's good because once you've set the terrain height, this is why I'd recommend doing the terrain height first. Is it won't change it when you go over and put other stuff on top of it. So I'm going to hold down Control, or in my case, is it Command? No, it's Controlled on the Mac still. So I'm just going to lay out some stuff, and there's a little a fault in MegaMek in the map editor. You can probably see it just on my screen. It's not quite laying it smooth. The edges are showing shadow, and that disappears when you save it. It's a bit.
You can also update by clicking valid. If you click the validate button down on the bottom of your menu, what it does is it checks your map for you and then it redraws it, so it gets rid of those shadowing issues. The shadowing issues are because it's calculating sort of the hill edges on the fly, and it has trouble when you're doing a multi-hex like that.
So again, a little bit of map kind of ideas is sometimes you want to create little areas and pathways through these maps. So just by doing that, you can think, okay, I'm going to have ways in which people are going to move through this if they want. So I've just put that in, and I'll hit validate again because that'll get rid of all of the extra colours there, and get rid of all the levels. And then I can I can stay with that hex one, or I can use the smaller one, and I'm going to push it up to 2. We're going to create quite a simple map here. We're not going to create anything extreme. I have had maps with plus 9, minus 9, these grand canyons that you can just imagine what would happen if someone pushed themselves. The maximum height in MegaMek is 9. The minimum height is minus 9. So you can get minus 9 without depth. Yeah, if you can add depth to water, so technically it can go below.
You can technically go higher than 9. The problem is that the main issue with doing that is that as you can see on the screen at the moment, the higher the altitude, the higher the elevation you go, the paler the color is. It gives you a nice visual indicator of how high up you've gone. And there's only 9 shades in positive. So if you're going upwards and you go more than 9 high, it stops the color changing element.
So I'm just adding a valley into a bit of this at -1. And one great thing, this is the best thing they ever invented in MegaMek, in the map editor. They invented a back button, which there wasn't in 46. And that has stopped multiple swearing.
The other useful tool when you're sort of painting elevations like this is the up-down button you can see there underneath the medium brush, which I think Stuart will probably get onto in a bit.
So you've got this up-down one, which basically you can just click on a hex and then you can just manually do it up-down in one.
You can drag with that as well. So that means that if you can effectively paint with your valley by just dragging the valley around. And it's useful for if you're doing larger maps like this, or 64s, being able to paint large swathes of hillside at a go speeds things up a lot.
Yeah, so you got lower. I didn't use this one much. Click and drag the map to the level, so you can use the brush, and then you click on I'll click over here, and you click on here, and then I can't remember how you do it. You hold down Control, do you, on this one? This one I don't actually use that much. So shift click
To
on the raise
raise,
to raise
alt
the
click
elevator.
to drop.
So you just click on that,
Yeah.
and it does it all like that. So that's just
And then you can
another
drag.
quicker way of doing that. So if you press Alt Tab, it
Yeah.
goes down like that. So I've done this. This is all going to come clear. I've done a valley for a particular reason. In a minute, we'll show a couple of skills. I'm sure Simon knows what's coming for that later. So this is a basic one. I'm going to stick some freeze. Let's go some freeze. Just a couple of freeze. A little bit of a map making decision. I've picked the wrong brush. I can click back. Brilliant. So it's a new theory.
And you're not on the anyone up down mode as well still,
up, down
which
mode,
is why.
I take that off. There we go.
Yep.
So I'm going to put some freeze here. Now, when you're designing the maps, you want to consider places to hide, because if it's level 1, then vehicles and infantry can hide behind them. If it's level 2 or level 3, then you can have mechs hiding behind it up against that, and so that's actually quite useful to have a couple of areas where you've got a level 2 map. I think most of the maps, one of my favourite maps in print is the new Alpine Battle map, because that's got quite a lot of free height, and it's quite fun to hide. But most of the rolling hill maps, you can't really hide a battle mech. So that's something to consider from a gameplay point of view if you want places to hide. Of course, battle mechs, are two. You probably know this, are 2 levels high, and so anything that's level 2 will block a line of sight for a battle mech if it's at ground level. So,
another thing to consider when you're just to jump in now, when you're talking about elevation levels and elevation changes, is the way that they can also block moving opportunities. Because, as you'll know, battle mechs can climb a hill up to 2 levels high. Vehicles can only climb a 1 level hill. So if you're going to be playing combined arms and someone's put a whole load of 2 height edges on, your vehicles aren't getting out of that valley.
But also that's an interesting thing, is you can actually, if you're playing combined arms, and it gives the battle mechs an advantage, which kind of they pay for in their BV because vehicles are so cheap, so that you can show one of the advantages of a battle mech over a vehicle. Is to be able to elevate terrain much simpler. Okay, so we've done some basics there. Okay, and just to smooth it all out, I'm going to hit validate. You don't have to keep hitting validate, but it looks nice, so it just smooths it all out. And we're going to go for the simple one. We're really going to work through these in order. So we've got the first 2 here, which really the first 4, but we've got here woods. And this brings up our menu now. So we've got our menu now of terrain settings. And this is a quick menu. So you can do this manually, which I'll show you in a minute. But you can just do it by quick selection. And
the buttons.
Yeah, the big buttons. And you can even use the middle mouse to scroll through light, heavy, and ultra woods. And you might notice it here. It also says woods, jungle, elevation. Now, this is a new one in 47. That because they put in foliage, and if I click on foliage is just light woods but with elevation 1.
That's it's a rule from TAC Ops.
Yeah,
terrain type from TAC Ops.
I'm not going to go for a lot of explaining the TAC Ops rules in this, but one thing I say, if you're playing MegaMek or you're playing different terrains, you really need to have a copy of TAC Ops, or you might not know exactly how everything's going to work. Most things work exactly as they say in TAC Ops. There are very few things that don't. Now, I've selected it, even though my terrain's set to 3, because I'm not holding down control, I can just go ahead now and just liberally paint on my trees. And I always do them in little groves of 3 or 4. You don't want to go crazy with trees, to be quite honest, from a map point of view, unless you are doing something like a massive forest, because very quickly you will find that you cut line of sight to the point where no one can shoot each other until they're on top of each other. Because you've got to remember that 3 points of woods, that's 1 light, sorry, 3 lights, or 1 light and 1 heavy, or 1 ultra block line of sight. And
also remember that they slow down movement considerably as well. So
stop.
it'll just take a week to get the enemy.
and stop hovercraft. So I've stuck in some lightwoods then, and usually what I do is after I've stuck in a few groves, then I stick in a couple of odd trees here and there. I think that tree's going to be in the middle of a river in a minute, so I'll get rid of that one. Which is actually a good opportunity to show you how to do that in a minute. I'm going to kick that up to heavy, and I'll do this in the menu here, so you can click on lightwoods there, and you've got these two numbers. Now this is a bit cryptic, it doesn't really explain it. This first number is always the number you want to change. It's basically the category. So wood's got 3 categories: 1 light, 2 heavy, and 3 ultra. Sometimes it comes up with invalid for some things. That's because they need to be done in combination with other things. And I can't remember what the woods needs.
Ultra woods need to be height 3.
They need to be height 3. It's like Endor.
Yeah, exactly. Ultra woods are so you can have a battle among redwoods rather than just among your average forest.
So I like to stick 1 heavy in every other kind of grove of trees. Again, as from a gameplay point of view, not to overly complicate it. And I've never really used Ultra, but that's really for if you want to play a hardcore map. You don't need to change this other number here. The elevation you could change, so I could click on foliage and do that automatically. And foliage is quite useful if you're playing scrubland, deserts, and foliage is only level 1, so it doesn't affect line of sight unless you're standing in it, unless you're a vehicle or infantry, or another level 1 unit like battle armor. These other 2 ones here, this is jungle. Jungle has got a much higher movement point cost. I think it's 2 instead of 1 extra.
Yeah, it's +1 over woods. Effectively, yeah, it's the same in terms of line of sight, but it costs you extra to move through due to all those pesky undergrowth.
Yeah, and predators and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so watch out for the predators in the jungle. And foliage, there's jungle foliage as well. And you might notice that it's exactly the same, except we've just got the elevation. So that's the basics for this, for just doing trees. And that's one of our basic things. There are some maps that don't have trees, very few. If you're doing like Luna or even Desert Scrubland, you could add some foliage. But then you've got to very carefully pick your map things, because I think there's nothing more boring in BattleTech than having a game where it's too open and everybody can draw line of sight on everybody, and that makes it very dull. I know some people think that's their idea of heaven, but not me.
I suppose it depends. If you're the guy whose favoured mechs are the Awesome and the Archer, then yeah, that's probably your preferred engagement. But yeah, for most of us, it's.
I remember someone.
That's speaking as an Archer fan.
I remember someone playing 4 alicorns against me, each with 3 Gauss rifles, and then being upset that there were lots of cities in the middle of the map, so they couldn't see my mechs.
And that's why you picked that as the site for the engagement.
Yes. Anything what we want to say about trees, apart from the fact the trees do change depending on the map type. Oh, we have something we didn't mention right at the beginning. I will mention this quickly. The theme. So when you first, I'll click new, but I won't lose my map here. When I click new, there's a theme here. Now by default, it's this lovely. Now what do we call this? This is Savannah. This
grassland or grass, I think is the.
No, because the grassland one is deeper colour, isn't it? So this one's Savannah. There's grassland, which is deeper green, or is that?
There's not. No, this is grassland.
Oh, it is grassland. Okay.
What happened was in 47 point something, they switched. It used to be the default used to be desert, and then when the new map editor came out, they switched the default to grass because they realised more people were using that.
It's a nice one, and you've got desert, and then others which you don't use much. Snow's quite useful if you're going to do a wholly white map.
I'm actually working on a snow map at the moment.
Volcano is really hard to read, although it looks nice because it's such a dark background. But you don't need to change that. But what you can do if you want to create little areas of different colour is you can change the theme here and just do it for a couple of hexes. So if I wanted to create a little area of scorched area, I might put Luna on there. Or even just indicate a different area or zone. You can create a slightly different colour. So
what it'll look like will be previewed in the hex just below the menus as well, so you can sort of get a feel for what it's going to look like.
That's desert. There's no trees in Luna or Mars, but you can still do it. Also, the icons I think change slightly depending on the tile set. So you
Yes,
can get lunar, but it just does it as big
it's got crystals type
crystals.
things,
I didn't know
rocks.
that. Never done lunar map
Yeah,
before.
this tile set is the Saxaba tile set, which again is a change since I think 46 or 45. Changed the default tile set, which is a slightly more sort of artistically done set than the original one, and with more realistic trees and that kind of thing.
And they do
And again,
look stunning, and they're all different as well. So they're not uniform. So every time you click, you get a slightly different combination.
like on 6 different versions, so it means your woods don't look like you've been just plonking the same stamp down over and over again.
So we've done all the trees, and we've changed it. We can change the tile set color there. We're going to look at water. Now, water is an interesting one because water is again it's what we call a base terrain type, and it has an attribute called depth. So when you're thinking about water, water is at the level of your base terrain. So if this is level 0, the surface of the water is going to be level 0, but then it's going to have a depth to it. So I'm going to just stick a river that's going to run down here, and then it's going to kind of drop down a level. And again, sometimes it's easier to use the thicker brush and sometimes the bigger brush. And I'm going to overwrite that woods there. So now we're going to drop down into a fast running river here, but now this is dropped down into a canyon. So now you can see the hex says level -1, depth 1, which means if your mech was standing in that, it wouldn't be able to see out the canyon, if you see what I mean. So that helps. And I'm going to switch up now to the bigger hex, the bigger paintbrush.
The other thing to remember is that if you've put in a depth 1 river in a level -1 canyon, it's going to be a 2 elevation change to climb out as well. So it'll slow down mechs climbing out of the river, which is just something to consider for the gameplay purposes.
This looks a bit too artificial, this what I've got here, because it's basically a bit too straight. And what you can try and do is just try and break up the edges a bit. So I'm going to use a very powerful tool for this. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to click on a hex. And when you do that, you copy the hex into the current hex type, including the elevation. And that's really useful for quickly changing once you've got some terrain down. I'm going to have to hit Control again so I can change the elevation. I just want to, let's choose the smaller map type here. I just want to try and make it a bit more organic looking, because sometimes, because of the hexagonal nature of maps can end up looking very uniform, which is, just an aesthetic thing. It can look very too much symmetrical, isometric, or whatever. So there we go. So we've got a nice big river. Okay, depth 0, by the way, is very useful because depth 0 creates a fjord. So if you want to change the depth of the water, and one of the nice things I like about this is the color changes with the depth. So you get a deeper blue as it goes further down. So I'm going to put a depth 0. I'm going to have a fjord going across here, and if I just click on that, that'll overwrite that. Now it doesn't have depth there, and the mechs can just walk across that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I go up to depth 2,
you make some nice deep
and I'm going to put some, not overly done it, because depth 2 can be problematic for gameplay, just because the MP to move into it and out of it. But it is very nice to have depth 2, because depth 2 you can hide your mechs in. You can hide your mech if you go depth 1, if you have to. Your mech has to be prone. So there's lots of gameplay opportunities to rise up from depth 1 and from depth 1 or depth 2 rivers, either by standing in depth 1 or doing or being stood up in depth 2. So that's the basics there of depth. So I've got some depth 2, some lots of depth 1, and some depth 0 just to fjord across there.
One thing I occasionally do when I've been sort of painting the elevations on, I don't usually use isometric view when I'm playing, but I will occasionally tap the T key, I think, on the keyboard shortcut, or view option on the view menu.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Switch on isometrics. Yeah,
Mm.
because use it just for making sure that the hills are roughly where I think I wanted to put them. And also, when you do that, it also redraws the map. It does a refresh on the map drawing as well, so it cleans up any of your elevations. So that's I don't tend, as I said, I don't tend to use it when playing, but that's just a personal preference. But it can be useful for working out if your hill's as deep as you thought it was.
And this is why we're inviting him on to talk here, because he knows more stuff than me. So, yeah, that's really good, because you can also see if something just logically doesn't make sense, like you've accidentally hit something far too deep.
I have occasionally put when you've accidentally put a river on a hill because you didn't notice that you changed the elevation. Been there, done that.
And of course, having some logic, like having the river running downhill and not having the river like going uphill, and then downhill again. Is personal preference, of course, but I like to obey the laws of physics when doing map making. Now, there is one other thing in water, and that is rapids. And the rapids, I think we'll show it in a minute, is another terrain set. So I think it's a good idea to show it now because it's what we call an overlay. So you've got base terrain, which is like the water, and then the overlay is something which will add to this. So if I want to overlay rapids, I go to my drop-down menu. There's lots of things here which we'll talk about later. But I'm going to go for rapids. Now, it looks really nice. I'm not sure exactly if it works as well as intended in MegaMek. The basic rapids is 1, and then there's torrent, which is 2. And go ahead.
So yeah, it doesn't apply. TAC Ops includes rules for water flow direction, which MegaMek doesn't apply. But the torrent rule, the rapids and torrent basically just make life more difficult if you're trying to cross the river. Is the simplest way of describing them.
So you can add a couple of areas of fast-flowing river, and because it's an overlay, even though it says invalid here, because it's an overlay, I can click, and it should.
If you click Shift under it,
I've got to do Shift because I've got to do overlay type, haven't I? So if you go to up here, it says Shift allows you to add terrain, and that overlays it on top of things. Like trees aren't a base terrain; they overlay on top of other things. So you just click Shift, and it's not. I've got to have water on there as well. It doesn't allow me to deploy it without water. So I'm going to put water depth 1 on there.
You need to select. That's one of the tips is that occasionally, if you are changing stuff in the terrain settings, check the little window below that's been highlighted to make sure that you're actually changing one of the rows in it, because otherwise, all of the little changes you're making to those numbers aren't going to actually have any impact.
I do that
it's
all the time.
Frustrating when you've done it a few times. Yeah,
it's quite nice, but it makes PSRs a bit more difficult, I think, in them. And so if you're altering this up here, it doesn't auto watch the hexes down here. So we've got some rapids there, and that just shows you can overlay multiple types, which we'll look at in a bit more detail in a minute. So that's water, and again we've got a nice water feature going across there. At the moment, this water is a bit too intrusive on the map because it's going to make life quite difficult because there's only got one fjording location. But we're going to change that in a little while by creating some bridges. Mud's a nice, or swamp's a nice thing to add. You can add swamp around here. We're not going to add any swamp, but mud's quite useful as well. I like having mud, and mud you can just put around some of the edges of the water like this. And it's not too bad mud. It makes you make a PSR, or you get bogged down, you get stuck in the mud. So it's quite a nice little thing to limit movement again sparingly. Rough is a good one, and again you can just paint this over. So if I click rough, if I want to add rough to anywhere here, it won't change the height. So I can click on the level there. And rough's the kind of thing you just liberally spread around your map. In some maps, like mountainous maps, you tend to kind of put the rough in places where it makes more sense, like a scree slope at the
craggy
bottom.
bits and scree.
Yeah.
The other thing about rough is that not only does it slow down mech, so I've used it as well to produce a sort of a field designed to slow the advance of the enemy, because we haven't as yet got a bollards sprite, although I believe someone is working on it because I was asking a little bit too loudly. But the other advantage of rough is that if you're playing combined arms, it means that it avoids the penalty for damage for infantry being caught in the open, because it gives them something to hide behind.
Oh, and the other important thing about rough is it is a valid thing for hidden deployment. So,
Yes.
because you can only do hidden deployment in buildings, woods, and rough, as per the Total Warfare rules. I always find it a bit weird. You can't actually do hidden deployment in Depth 2 water. It doesn't let you, but you can do hidden deployment in the other ones. So difference.
I think there's a RATA query about that one because quite a few people have asked the same question.
So the difference.
So we may be lucky.
The difference between rough and rubble is rubble makes you make a PSR when you go for it, and rough doesn't. So rough, you just cost you movement points. There's also 2 grades of rough. Again, you can click on there to update that. So you've got ultra rough and rough. So this is like, 1 day stubble, and this is lockdown stubble. And it's good just to, again, not overly do it, but it makes people make choices. And I think the great thing about Battletech maps is people making choices about where they go. Do they go around? Do they go through? So swamp we've done, rough we've done, mud we've done, pavement. So pavement, I'll just show you, although we can use it in combination. Pavement is every battle mech's worst nightmare. And if you're not sure about this, just ask my opponent from the last game when his Ice Ferret, while fleeing from Comstar forces on Tukid, stacked it completely on a piece of road. So I'm just going to create a pavemented area here. You don't have to have pavemented areas. Where pavement's good is to mark out cities. And again, you don't have to have buildings, don't have to be on pavement, but particularly if you're doing, what are they called?
Drop ports.
Yeah, drop ports. And if you want to create a drop port, you want to create, without going into too much detail about this, you want to create a rather large area, about 7 hexes in radius, for a dropship to land on, or a long runway for at least 20 hexes by 3 hexes for an Aerodyne dropship. And no, Aerodyne dropships can't take off and land vertically HBS. How many times have we tried to? But why can't my Leopard dropship land like it does in the HBS game? Because they did it wrong. I know it's more.
They got it wrong.
It's more cinematic. Yeah, obviously.
But as Stuart mentions, pavement isn't the main thing about pavement. It's great for withstanding the landing of dropships, but battle mechs have a bit of an issue getting grip. Seem to be having an issue getting grip or purchase on reinforced ferroconcrete. So if you try running on pavement and then turning, it's much like a polished kitchen floor and a pair of socks. And on a map like this, the entertaining bit is you then can end up sliding into the river, which I've seen several times in battles.
Or sliding into a building and then falling into its basement and then having the building collapse on you. Not that that's happened to me personally.
Same.
So that's pavement. But pavement's going to come back in a minute later. Snow, again, it's a nice overlay. It overlays onto other things. So if I wanted to have a little snowy hilltop here, and you can have levels of snow. You can have deep snow or thin snow. I won't go into the details of them, but they do look slightly different, although you have to look very carefully at them to see what the difference is. So this is like Kent today.
They look slightly different, and South London's similar.
So if you hold down Shift, it overlays without destroying what's on there. If I don't hold down Shift and I just click, it wipes it out. So I can overlay a little bit of snow here and there. Not that you need to, but just to demonstrate that. And then you've got deep snow here as well, or heavy snow, I should use the right word, that has more effect. And that's the only, there isn't any more snow than that.
It is one of those cases where the terminology being used on MegaMek doesn't quite tally with what's used in the book, because Stuart is quite right. In TAC Ops, it's called deep snow.
Yeah.
and in MegaMek it's referred to as heavy snow. It's just a terminology difference. Gameplay-wise, heavy snow in MegaMek uses the TAC Ops rules for deep snow. So you get stuck if you're not careful, and it slows you down.
And if
like
you want
deep snow,
if you wanted to do a whole map like this, you could pick the big terrain here, and you could say, right, I want light snow, and I want it over a big area. So you can just go like this. Weirdly enough, and this is a bit weird, again, strange. You can actually put snow on top of water. It shouldn't be able to, but you can for some reason.
Again, it's because snow's an overlay.
Yeah.
And as yet, the logic hasn't been put in place to prevent that. But at some point, I will probably make a note of it and say, can someone fix this?
I'm going to skip buildings for the moment. I'm going to go to ice, because ice, again, is another useful overlay. On particular maps, again, it overlays water and it creates a crust of ice at the level that you fall through on a 6 or more on 1d6. What's weird about it, again, I think this is another feature request, is you can't destroy the ice, which I always thought was a shame. You can't shoot the ice out from underneath a battle mech, because it isn't unmodifiable terrain, unfortunately.
There are rules in, as I said, Tech Ops has rules for melting ice out from under people and so on, but as yet they haven't been implemented in MegaMek. They're probably on someone's list. But there was quite a lot of stuff that was being planned that has been hit by recent global events.
So I think that basically covers all of the basics. So basically now we've got to the point where we're thinking, we can go away and build some good maps. So now we're going to launch into things that require a little bit more complexity, and that's buildings. So when we click on the buildings tab, you've noticed you've instantly got a light building, and you've got 3 fields. And what's more curious is you can have more fields and buildings, but these are the basic ones you have to have. If any of these get taken away, it will come up invalid, and you can't change the building. Now there are some quick things you can do to change these. I never use them, to be quite honest, but it says here you can hold down Control and mouse wheel to change building type, Shift to change CF, Alt to change to single hex mode, and which basically means I'll show you what that means in a minute, and Control Alt to change the building type, keeping single hex.
One thing to note is if you do use the Control and mouse option to change the building type, so change it from light to medium to heavy, it will automatically update the CF of the building as well to the defaults for that building type.
It doesn't do that.
As you see here, light building is, it doesn't do it if you just change it using the options. It's the combined function. So as you can see here, light building standard CF 15, medium is 40, heavy is 90.
So I'm going to paint on a couple of.
So that's a quick way.
What have I done there?
Wrong brush.
Yeah. And I've also got a light shopping centre. Here we go. So I'm just going to put a couple of, and all of the buildings look slightly different. So I'm just going to have a couple of farm buildings here and there that can be stomped on flat, because everybody likes stomping through light buildings, and then falling over when they fail the PSR. Again, not that's ever happened. So as I go to the light building option here, I can go up to medium, to heavy, to hardened, and they change the picture. And I can change the elevation. I don't know what the maximum is of the elevation, but it starts getting silly about 10. Obviously, in real world, you're thinking that, but you have to remember that you can't jump up on them. But they're quite good to have some skyscrapers, some elevation 5 and 6, because it stops jump mechs jumping over them, unless they're spiders and they can jump over, the shard. Probably
everything. One thing is that as Stuart's mentioned, the sprite for the building changes with the elevation and with the building type. Once you get buildings of a certain height, I think it's about height 5 and upwards, they just use a standardized sprite because someone had better things to do than do a whole set for every single possible elevation of building.
It's nice at a glance, you can see some differences, can't you?
Yeah, it just means that if you start seeing a whole load of buildings that look the same, it's worth double checking what the height is before you try and do anything foolish like step off them.
So
it's also the case with multi-hex buildings, which I'm sure we'll get onto shortly.
Yeah, definitely. So the CF here you can change. CF 14 to 39 is light. CF 40 to, I can't remember what it is now. CF 40 is medium. 90 is heavy.
90s.
And then 120 is the minimum for hardened, and then 150 is the maximum CF you can have. Although there is no internal logic check on this. So what's weird is you could have a light building with 150 CF. So you've got to apply your own internal logic. And that is important, the category, because that affects things like infantry. So I'm going to put this up to 40 CF. And you can actually just type rather than going up through the clicker. And it changes it. So if I put one building here, and what I've done there is I've overwritten the concrete. So say I don't want to overwrite the concrete, I can again hold Shift. So it overlays. Is it Shift?
Yeah.
Oh, one weird bug on this is if you've got a hex selected and you then try and click on it to do something, it doesn't work. You have to click somewhere else. Just click undo and then click back on that hex for it to work. So that's a weird bug in MegaMek. So I've got one building here, and I'll just put another one over here. But now I can make bigger buildings. Now, when you do that, it changes the icon to the more generic icon. It doesn't look as nice. So if I put a building here, and a building here, and a building here, it just automatically changes the direction. There is no way in MegaMek to change the way this shape looks. It's a default internal logic thing, and how it does it. But if I want to put two separate buildings together, there's two options. Either one, I can use the quick key, so I can use Alt and click. Or you can click on the exits button here. And
you need to select the building row.
I've got to select the building row first, so I've got to click on, let's just do this right. You'll click building there, then you click on exits, and you have no exit selected. And I'll show you what exits means in a minute, because that's one of the more advanced features. And if you do that, so again, select exits, it will mean it won't join up. And again, I've just, let's put one there and one there. Now this one wasn't selected with exits. And so it's done something illegal. It's tried to join up. So I'm going to overwrite that with one with no exits selected.
If you don't define the exits manually, as Stuart has ably demonstrated, MegaMek will attempt to join buildings that are next door to each other if they haven't got the exits defined manually. If you do define them manually, you can sort of handcraft your buildings in an artisan fashion.
And it does make a slight difference in gameplay as well, because shooting from one building to another building is slightly different from shooting internally inside the same building. I don't know if that's reflected by the rules set, but certainly in tabletop it is. So that's the basic building settings. Now, all of these buildings here, they have. Let's just stick a couple of others on just to show you the other tile sets. But you can see them, so you can go for a heavy building with whatever CF you want really, but to keep it correct, between 90 and 190, I think is heavy. And I can just stick this heavy building. Ooh, let's just find somewhere. Let's stick it up here. Doesn't make sense, but there you go. And so once you've set your buildings up, you've also got other options for buildings. Now, I'm going to press Alt just to select one of these medium buildings. And you can see it's got pavement listed on there. It's got the free building things, and I can actually add some more. And some of these things you need, and some of them you don't need. Well, actually, none of them you actually need, other than the ones that are on there. So you've got building armor. That enables you to add armor to buildings. Why is armor different from CF? Because when you shoot at buildings, if you do over 1/10 of their CF in damage, you do a critical to any turrets on there. And there are some other CF reasons as well.
The other big thing is that with a building, as you'll know, the CF is the maximum weight of mech that can stand on the building. And and armor does not affect that. So when you strip all the armor off a building, it stays just as strong and can still support whatever mech you had standing on top of it. Once the armor's gone and you start taking the CF off, then you can collapse the building out from underneath the mech, which is a lot more fun.
And armor's useful for things like turrets, and you can also go for super buildings like CF 150 buildings with armor as well.
They take weeks to destroy.
Yeah, you've got. I don't use that one. Base collapse. Let's do this one first. Basement types.
Nope.
Basement type. If you are fed up of dying by falling into unknown basements, then add basement type 0. Otherwise, the basement is rolled randomly at the moment you accidentally walk into, or you either walk into a building intentionally, or you accidentally slide into a building. So if you're fed up with that, if you click on basement type, add it, and then click on, where's it gone? Basement type 0. It will not have any basements. To find out all of these codes mean, I'll show you in a minute. There is a README file in the documents section, which you need if you want to do certain things. So the other type of basement is, again, something for the other type of building thing is from TAC Ops. It's called building class. And with building class, if I do add terrain, building class is either
down the bottom there.
Yes,
yeah.
Standard. Oh, they've changed the thing. They've actually given it a name now. It's standard, gun emplacement, hangar,
Fortress.
Fortress. Okay, Fortress is stupid. It's Star League era stuff. Brian Cash.
So, Fortress is definitely is for military buildings. Gun emplacement under TAC Ops rules should only be 1 hex in size and one elevation high, because basically it's a bunker for you to stick a turret on.
So that's a new change. It actually tells you what it is now. Before it never used to tell you. You just have to look up the number in a README file. So you've got hangar, which is easier to walk through, but hangars look really nice. They look really pretty if you're doing things. You've got fortress, and you've got gun emplacement. Gun emplacements, use them very sparingly, because gun emplacements they take extra. They only take half damage basically. So I'm going to stick one up.
Gun
there you go.
Gun emplacements. While it is tempting to use hardened CF 120 or heavy CF 90 buildings for your gun emplacements, because it sort of makes some kind of logical sense, because they've got that damage reduction. So it takes a lot more damage to damage them. Gun emplacements stick around for a lot longer than you think, and so just be careful when you're setting them, because I've had occasions when I've been testing out maps that I've made, and the gun emplacements have just become particularly annoying, and I know they're going to annoy other people, so I've had to change the settings before I release the map.
I'm just going to show you how nice the hangar looks. There are manual numbers, by the way. It's 0 to 3, but now it tells you, so you can do it like that. So standard building, hangar, and the hangars look really nice. So if I go and change this to hangar, I do like the way the hangars look. You get a nice kind of mech hangar there. The other ones, there's building fluff. Now at the moment, building fluff doesn't exist. I think they're going to change it.
Building fluff does exist.
Oh, well, they've changed it, have they? Again, it's another one updated. Because it used to be that fluff. Well, basically, fluff
but not
is,
on hangers.
Yeah, fluff is something that doesn't. So I've got to select this building here. Fluff is something that doesn't change anything about the game. It is just fluff. It looks nice. It's like helipads and stuff like that. And it used to be they were all collected under one category called fluff, and there's a move now to move them to separate things. Now there isn't currently, I don't think, a definitive list that I found of all the different fluff types. I'm sure there is somewhere. There you go. You can get little, basically, things that overlay to what they look like, which is quite nice. So that I didn't realise that they'd added that, because that's a recent one.
That's another recent one.
Before it was empty, wasn't it? Have they added water fluff as well?
They haven't added water fluff. They have added road fluff. which gives you smoother corners. Is the main thing I use for that. Road fluff setting 1, but we'll get onto that.
So that's the building, and then there's nothing else really on buildings we need to look at. So we've done base collapse. Basically, is if you want to create ruins where you have partially destroyed buildings. I think. Again, I haven't used that one a great deal, but one of the good things to use if you just want to create a load of buildings is just click on this, and then use the mouse wheel holding down Control, and it makes it very easy. So you can just go Control. I can move it up. Actually, I haven't got the. There you go. The mouse wheel doesn't work very well on my Magic Mouse. No, it's not, because it's very sensitive, the wheel. But you can flick through the different types, and it makes it nice and easy. So that's buildings. Roads are fun because they've updated roads an awful lot. They've made roads a lot easier, but if you're obsessive compulsive like me about making things look correct, then you might get upset and want to change something on roads, which I'll show you in a minute.
Hi.
Yeah. So when you click, you might think, oh, I don't want my road to look like that. But the wonderful thing about this version is it automatically configures roads. Now, what it doesn't do is automatically configure roads if they're one hex next to each other, and then it'll join them all up into something that looks like Milton Keynes. If you're not in UK, you don't know what Milton Keynes looks like, but something like what the middle of Los Angeles probably looks like. So I've created some, and I've got a. Oh, I want to use Shift on that one because I want to do it over the pavement. Now these count as paved areas, of course, for gameplay.
Now, one of the things you'll notice here
that's now on pavement, isn't it?
Is on the right-hand side. There's a checkbox just underneath the back arrow, which is called Exit Roads to Pavement.
There we go.
And that's because obviously, if you're just building roadways through the landscape and you come to a large paved area, you're going to want the two to connect up.
So yeah, if you click that off, then it'll make them look nice. Otherwise, it'll like join them. It'll join a road onto the paved area. If I put a road here, though, it does some weird stuff. Okay, it starts joining them all up in a fluid way. I love these junctions, and they're very reminiscent of what goes on in our city planning here. Now, what I think drives obsessive compulsive people nuts is this kind of like half road where it peters off into nothing. And that's where you need to go to the Exits tab. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click Alt to have it selected. So make sure I've got the road selected, and I go up to Exits. And this is saying what hexes are open to the road. So if I have those, that means the top and the bottom hexes will be part of the road. And if I click again here, it will do that. And this one I'm not happy with about because I want it to turn. So again, I change the hexes to here and do that again. And this used to be the only way to do maps before that what modding, and it used to take ages to do roads, but now it's a lot easier. And again, I need to do Shift to overlay. Shift? It's not Shift, it's Control. Again, the back
Shift
button is wonderful. It's Shift to overlay, isn't it?
Yeah, Shift to overlay.
Yeah. Shift. There we go. So if you ever get a road situation you don't like, I would recommend using the normal roads most of the time because they're really quick. But if you ever get a situation you just don't like the look of, or it's joined up roads where you don't want to, you've got the option of going back and manually configuring them.
Just using automatic roads is a lot faster when you're just putting them across the middle of across a map. The moment you start coming next roads near each other or near pavement areas, or at the edges of the map, so they don't just taper off, that's when sort of customizing them is sort of looks nicer.
I think particularly at the edges of the map.
Those of us who are finicky.
So that's the roads. Now there is roads fluff, and I love the roads fluff because the roads fluff is got parked cars and everything on there. So if we go down to road fluff,
for all of your Godzilla fantasies.
Yeah, you can't pick them up and throw them. And actually, that's
this is where we differ in that I tend not to use much in the way of fluff on my maps because I don't like having parked cars because it looks like they could be, have a functional use providing cover for infantry and that kind of thing.
yeah.
But I do appreciate them when they've been used well on other people's maps. So it's one of those things. I keep thinking, oh, should I use it? And then part of me just backs out of it at the last minute.
They do
but
make
they do
they do make the
really
map
good on
look,
some things.
yeah, they make the map look more complicated, which can be bad. And you've got to match them very, very carefully, the road fluff. So you've got trees, which is a good one. I think 5 is park cars. Is it 5 or 6? Oh, you've got to change it to 1.
The trees one is slightly disconcerting because they look like trees, but they have no effect whatsoever on the game. So I tend to, instead of that, you can obviously put trees, have a hex that has both a road and tree and light woods on it, and I quite often use that one for roads traveling through trees.
I don't think all of the fluff is in road fluff because this is one of the transitions. If I go to the fluff category, which is what it used to be before they updated it.
Yeah, one thing you can do with road fluff is smooth corners. There is, which is if you select one of your corners and then apply road fluff 1.
Okay. Try that in a second.
You no longer get the entertaining 60-degree angle, but you get something that actually looks like the road going around a bend.
I'll have a go at that. So if I go for the regular fluff, now fluff is, there's loads of things here, and this is one of the things you can just look at and experiment with. And one of them, fluff category 5, is park cars, and it's got a road on it, but that road has got no gameplay, so you have to overlay it on top of a road. And you've got to align it correctly. So if I want the road going up, again you can see how you can spend hours doing this if you want to, or you can do it really quickly.
What you mean?
Yeah, no. You can click here, and you've got some parked cars next to this building. He's having a party, obviously, breaking lockdown rules and all sorts. And you can just add that nice fluff. And again, it's got no gameplay options there. So that's road. So road is basically very easy. There are different categories of road. Oh, I'll do that thing you've said. I'll try road fluff category 1. Let's try that on this bend here. So let's go to road fluff and add
category 1. And you don't need any exits.
Oh, there we go.
And there you go.
And if
you get a curve.
Click on there, and that's pretty, isn't it? And I can do it anywhere I want where I've got a curve, and it's slightly less now hairpin driving. Oh, but it's cut my end off my road, so I'm going to go back and manually do the exit again. So let's choose those 2 exits. And if you are someone who has secret aspirations to be a city planner, to put lots and lots of rows of nice suburban buildings with roads going in, and you can have great fun designing your maps, and then laugh as the mechs then try and fight on it and keep falling over.
If you want to go for that one, we can show you one of those at the end of the of this, showing you the kind of mess you can make with buildings and roads, because I've got several examples straight off the top of my head.
And Simon's got a folder on MegaMek. That's not updating that one. I think the road fluff must be overriding the exits. Oh no, it's because I've clicked exits on. I think it's because I've clicked exits on
the fluff, not on the road.
Yeah. Let me just click off of that. Hang on, undo. Again, what happens is you get stuck because you can't modify something you've clicked on. You have to click off it and click on it again. You never get really to modify the hex that you're currently selected. It's more just modifying the paint tool, I think. There we go. So that's correct now. So I'm just being finicky now. I just want to do this. Okay. So we've looked at roads. There is a road category 0. I recommend not using it because it doesn't look like a road. It looks like a path, and that throws people off. Because it
Yes,
actually you can still skid on paths, and there is no road category 2.
There is road category 2
Oh,
is
it's
like
no
a
fluff,
road,
is it?
but it always has been. That's one of the reasons why road fluff was added,
Ah,
to separate out the fluffy stuff from the stuff that has actual game function.
yeah.
The other thing about the road category 0, which is the one which looks like a path, those of you who've been paying slightly more attention to TAC Ops than some of us, there are dirt rules for dirt roads and gravel roads in TAC Ops. Those aren't yet implemented in MegaMek, but they are on the to-do list because some people, me, keep asking for them. So we should see those hopefully at some point, if someone has enough time to actually get around to doing it, as opposed to actually implementing useful rules. It's mostly because I want to have dirt roads through my forests, through my forest maps, because having tarmac roads just irks me. But again, that's just me being me. So for the purposes of everyone else, don't worry about it.
And if you did want to do a 2-lane highway, you unfortunately have to do it all manually. If you want to have the 4-lane highway, with 2 roads next to each other, or we call it in the UK a dual carriageway, you have to do it manually because the automatic road will keep joining up the 2 roads together. To demonstrate, it will make a mess. It will look like let's just put some here and then I'll undo it. So I've got one road here, and if I put another road next to it, it just turns it into something that looks like every town planner's worst nightmare or best fantasy. I'm not sure which.
Swindon, I think, is what we're aiming for here.
So lots of roundabouts, which are much a British institution, roundabouts. So we've done roads. Now we're going to get on to everybody's worst nightmare. Bridges. I say that because I have personal experience with bridges not working half the time. Bridges have 3 things to them, but the most important thing about bridges is you need to be able to get on them and off them, and that's one of the things that isn't well defined. Now you want to think carefully about your bridge. What's it doing? Now, is it kind of rising up and then going down, or is it going to be level? So I've purposefully made 2 examples of that in this map. I'm going to take off the isometric. So in this valley, actually over here, let's do a bridge across. We're just going to do a footbridge here across this. So this is level 0. Okay, so even though it's depth 1, it's level 0, and we want a bridge going from this level 1 to this level 1. So when we think about the height of the bridge elevation, that number is the number above the tile set. So you add it on to it. So if you're at level 0 and you want a bridge at level 1, you've got to have elevation 1. If you're at level -1 and you want to be at 1, then you've got to have an elevation of 1. So it's 1 above. It's not the overall elevation.
One thing to remember with bridge elevations as well is that if it's a bridge over land, or indeed over a depth 0 water, if it's a bridge elevation 1, mechs aren't going to be able to walk underneath the bridge. This does cause a lot of frustration in games, especially when some people get carried away with bridge designs in cities. That'll be me. So because mechs will have to climb up onto the bridge to be able to go over it, or they'll just have to batter through the bridge. So if you want mechs to go underneath it, you're going to need bridge elevation 2.
And if you want vehicles going under it, it has to be level 1. And if you could theoretically have a bridge at the same elevation of the water, which is fine. It just creates some issues that you can't go under it, basically, and you can't go across it because it basically blocks the river from hovercraft going down it, for instance.
Yeah, it means hovercraft will be fine because what happens is they just go onto the bridge and then pop off the other side and back onto the river. If you're one of the people who uses watercraft, the bridge will be a complete obstruction to them.
Although they only do that if you've got climb mode on, which is really annoying because you have to climb onto the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. That climb mode's another thing we'll talk about in a minute. But so we've got bridge CF, which is just like and bridge category, which is just like light hardened. So again, if we make another thing in map design is think about your bridges. Are they going to be civilian footbridges, or are they going to be industrial bridges that mechs can walk over? Because everyone gets frustrated when they don't read the tooltips and then they get on a bridge and then it collapses underneath them. Now, if I just stick this bridge, and I'm going to use the overlay tool, which means I don't have to include the underlying terrain. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just going to put a footbridge across here. So it's going to be quite light CF. Now, it looks wrong, and that's because it is. Okay, at the moment, this bridge is unfinished. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's got no connections to the land. So you have to go to click on the bridge, and you have to click on exits, and you have to define in which direction the bridge is running. And obviously for this one we want the bridge running with an exit at the north and an exit on the south. So click on north, and if you don't do this, then things can't get onto the bridge, which then really creates a problem in gameplay. So I click there. Now it's changed, so it looks like a proper bridge, and it tells me the height of the bridge as well. So it's level 1, height 1 over a level 0. So this bridge now I'll be able to enter. Now if I instead came in from Hex 0706 and tried to enter it, it wouldn't let me because there's no exit to that hex. And now the only way you can get across that is you use something called climb mode, and it costs you extra movement points to climb onto the bridge from a hex it isn't connected to. So if, for instance, you needed to go past this and you were a mech, you would have to climb onto the bridge. If you're a vehicle, you should be able to go underneath it. But there's an option in MegaMek called climb mode. So that's our basic footbridge. And if I go over to here and I'm going to change this to CF, I'm going to make this a really heavy duty bridge. And I think you can even set this to be 200. Remember, if you've got a stacking situation and you're stacking a mech with a vehicle, you can breach the bridge.
Yes, if you are one of those people who likes using lots of demolisher tanks, try to avoid putting 2 of them on the same bridge stretch, because otherwise you're going to have no bridge and no tanks.
And of course you can.
It's entertaining for the opposition, but
you can shoot, and they're destroyable, like buildings. They're destroyable, so you can destroy bridges, of course, and take them out. So this is bridges now set elevation 1. The exits are set to north and south. So if I click there and show you, and click on the little exits icon here, because it's got every exit combination's got a code, which makes no sense unless you're, obsessive compulsive can memorize all of them, which I can't. And then you've got the type. We've made this oh, sorry, I've changed the elevation. I don't want elevation 4 because that would be bad. Elevation's going to be 1. There isn't a bridge type, actually. There's just bridge CF. There is bridge armor, I think. Is there? Can you get armored bridges? No, it's just building armor. So bridges is just bridge CF, bridge elevation. And when we click on this now, again, holding down Shift so it doesn't overwrite. Because if I click there, it'll overwrite basic terrain. So I'll undo that. And because this is now -1, I want the bridge at the same level as ground level. So that's why I set it to height 1. And that way it will line up. The other problem this comes is if you're creating desert canyons with bridges over them, and where the desert floor is at different heights. So if you have like a dry, imagine this map, but the riverbed being dry. And then when you went over the deeper things, you'd have to set the bridge elevation higher than it would be.
Yeah.
So you've always got to add the bridge elevation onto the current level so that the bridge is level all the way along. Otherwise you'll get gameplay issues where you go to cross it and it says you can't unless you hit climb mode, and then it does strange things. So that's a perfect construction bridge, which I wish I'd learned a long time ago when I first started making bridges.
The other challenge is if your bridge doesn't meet up at the ends, like the one, Stuart's just done one which meets up neatly at the ends. If it doesn't meet up the ends and you need to use therefore need to use climb mode to get onto it, it's quite easy to fall underneath it. And we had one game in which an urban mech spent pretty much the entire game underneath in the river underneath the bridge because he toppled off the embankment while trying to get on the bridge. Yeah. It has become known as the Bridge Troll Urban Mech. It did take out a Wolverine side torso, but unfortunately the bridge it was underneath was also an artillery pre-planned location. So over the course of the game, it just got battered.
So we've got a nice clean bridge there. Of course, bridges can go in other directions. Bridges can even change directions in the middle, so you can have bridges that go across. You don't need to. There's no real world physics. You can have a bridge any length you want. Although sometimes for fluff, you can create little struts underneath the bridge, just by using like concrete underneath it. I've never tried building a bridge over buildings. Does it work?
Yes. I've done one of my maps. Canal City 2 has got some bridges that run over buildings because there's a raised freeway across the middle of the city. And I've also recently done a map which features bridges over forests, which was inspired by the H1 highway in Hawaii and the Petrobras viaduct in Brazil, I think it is. And that was the result of seeing them on telly and going, I wonder if that'll work in MegaMek. And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. You can build a bridge to enable traffic to pass over a forest without having to cut it down first.
One of the weird things, I did build a bridge that went over magma, but because I set the bridge at level 0 rather than level 1, you were still affected by the magma. So when you walked over the bridge, you melted. So that's not a good idea.
Inspired.
Yeah. So that's bridges, and bridges I think are probably one of the most difficult things to get the hang of, so hopefully that's helped people a lot. Next is fuel tanks. Now, as people might know, I have basically got an obsession with fuel tanks. I seem to be some sort of pyromaniac in a past life because I think no map is complete without at least 3 or 4 devastating fuel tanks. And you click on the fuel tank option and you can basically, they're just like buildings. They've got an elevation, a category, so light, medium, heavy. They've got a CF, they've got an elevation, which is again just like buildings, and it changes the fluff slightly. One thing I wish they'd do is you could just hide them as buildings, but you can't do that because everything's open, unfortunately. I wish there was some sort of like stealth mode in that where you could actually...
Stealth fuel tanks.
Yeah, stealth fuel tanks, so you don't realise they're fuel tanks until you walk into the building.
As you've probably noticed, those of you who've encountered Stuart's love of fuel tanks, the fuel tanks in MegaMek and the buildings in MegaMek don't work exactly as they do in Total Warfare and TAC Ops. Fuel tanks are a TAC Ops terrain type, or at least a building subtype, but were added to MegaMek before TAC Ops came out. And so they're a bit of a homebrew, but they are sufficiently entertaining that people still like using them.
I like to use them for generators as well. So if you've got to destroy a generator, then you can do that. And you can change to CF. If you want a wafer thin fuel tank that gets set off with any shot, then make it CF1. And then the magnitude. Now, magnitude works like this. I think I'm right here, that magnitude 40 does 40 points of damage to the hex you're in, 30 points of damage to the next hex, 20, and then 10. So magnitude 40 has a radius of 3. This does, and I have used this in a map. There is a magnitude 100 one, which is devastating.
What to be really careful about, as Stuart demonstrated when he clicked on the fuel tank button at the top, is that actually the default setting for a newly added fuel tank is magnitude 100. It is highly recommended that you change that before you start putting them on maps, because, as mentioned, magnitude 100 fuel tank will blast out to a 9 hex radius, and will do 90 points of damage to anything in the hexes next to it. And if that thing next to it is another fuel tank, what you end up with is a chain reaction which destroys half the map. And that it can be interesting, but it may not be what you intended when you were building the map. And we've seen that a few times.
I did have a nice map with it was a kind of bridgehead map where you had to go across the river, and there was a nice double lane highway bridge in the middle, except someone had put explosives, so basically fuel tanks, underneath each section of the bridge. And if anyone shot any one of the bits because I'd set the CF to be 1 because I'm evil like that. If anyone shot any of the fuel tanks, they would ignite. They would blow the bridge, and then they would set the next fuel tank off, which would then blow the bridge, and then so on. And so the bridge would just basically have big holes in it. Weirdly enough, it doesn't collapse because bridges in BattleTech are anti-gravity, of course.
Well,
but it was quite
there are
fun.
rules. There are rules for collapsing bridges in TAC Ops because it's TAC Ops and there's rules for everything. But they haven't necessarily all been implemented completely in MegaMek. I think the rule is that if you destroy more than half of the hexes of a bridge, it collapses. But I'm going to need to have a go at testing that out in MegaMek on a couple of my longer bridge stretches.
But in all seriousness, the fuel tanks just add a little bit of kind of a no-go areas where people have to be concerned. Do they go near that? Do they not? And it creates another bit of tactical thing. So you've got in the lore, of course, fuel tanks are quite common because you've got still quite a lot of use of petrochemicals. Not everything runs on fusion because fusion is quite rare depending what area you're in, especially like in the Fourth Succession Wars. And also you've got a lot of things like biogas. So you've got like a nice farmhouse here with biogas. Obviously, there's no health and safety in BattleTech, just like there isn't any sci-fi, which is why all sci-fi things have like, walkways with no handrails because the health and safety people are all
handrails are
executed. Yeah, and so if this fuel tank goes up, it's going to flatten the building next to it. Poor farmer, but he should have followed his health and safety. So it's quite good. And again, I can even put, and this is what I did. You can put the fuel tank underneath a bridge. Unfortunately, you can't hide fuel tanks. They're quite obvious what they are, and so I use them as generators and things. Otherwise, they act just like buildings. You can't add armor to them, but you change the CF of them, and you change the elevation of them.
Yeah.
In one of the Battle of Tukid online games, we used these to represent grain silos with flour in them by setting the CF to 1 and the damage to 20, which was quite good.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered most of the things. There is magma, and I'm not going to go to too much detail. Magma doesn't get used much, but magma again is magma crushed, I should say. If you're using like volcanic maps, you can have that, and then you can walk over it, but you can get stuck in it, and then it can start damaging your mech and melting you. Quite a useful use. Someone used this to represent hot mud pits in the Clan Steel Viper mission when they designed that map, because there's no way to replicate falling into a pit and instantly dying.
And it's because one of the challenges with some of the 2Kid maps in the map pack is that they've got special rules for unique terrain types on them, which can't as yet be replicated by MegaMek, like the hot mud pits from that one, or the wobbly rubble, I think was the term I used for it.
They changed it
on
to
the
Ultra
Robin's
Rubble.
Crossing map.
Yeah, I discovered
Ultra
that
Rubble
when playing it. And I think no map making tutorial would be complete without my favourite thing, because every one of my maps, apart from fuel tanks, is to go to Fluff. And there's a couple more things I'll just talk through quickly, but I won't, because these are a bit more advanced. And I'll go to Fluff, which, since I know my alphabet is actually before R, not after R.
It's earlier on, yeah.
Yes, it isn't. So there's actually one that's just called Fluff rather than Ground Fluff. I don't think the Ground Fluff's got anything in it yet. Actually, there's quite a lot of things to add here. So Fluff, and if you set Fluff to category 13, I like category. What category is it? I'll go through them quickly. So category 2 has got helipads in it, which are quite nice for adding on top of buildings. So I can add a helipad in the middle of this, holding shift, so it overlays it. I can add a helipad.
And you can also add them to
on the
wide
ground.
areas of tarmac or anything else.
Yeah, they've got no height and they've got no game thing. There is no Fluff 3. Fluff 4 is nice because you get these nice.
Remember, Fluff also, just because of the way the Fluff menu works, Fluff also has exits. So if you change the exit setting, you get different Fluff.
Yeah.
Because the indexing on the Fluff.
You get a category.
There is a.
and then
Yeah, a
the
category
thing.
and a number
So
subtype.
if I go up in this one, I get different kind of like nice features here. They're not always categorized together in common sense. Like there's bollards here, which I use for fluff, which are in that feature. So I use those quite often in map design. Category 5 is roads, which is quite useful today. Category 6 is like air conditioning units. I always call them that. You can stick them on top of very large buildings to make it look a bit more interesting. Category 7, I think, is empty. Oh no, these are buildings which don't have any game impact. I like using the building site one. Just because it looks nice, but otherwise it does confuse people because they think that they are buildings, but they've got no value. 8 is ledges, which are very weird, but you can create ledges around buildings. 9 is a monorail. So if you want a monorail going across, again, it's got no stats. You can't destroy it, and there's no train things.
Again, rail terrain type, because under TAC Ops, rails are a terrain type. They are treated as rough for people tripping over them unless you're travelling in the direction of the railway. Rail terrain type is again on the devs to-do list, and it's one they were hoping to get done this year, but the world happened instead. So, for those of you who like the idea of having a huge gun-bearing train barreling across the landscape and want to reenact that first the train heist from Firefly with battle mechs, it is on the to-do list, but for now we're just going to have to cross our fingers and wait and enjoy what we've got.
And there's a fluff train track there. And again, you can cycle through the settings there to get different directions, and some of them are empty, so don't think it's finished. But 13 is the one I always choose because 13 is animals. So
poultry and animals.
We've got to have a cow in the field here. So here's the cow.
A giant 30-meter long cow.
Again, they don't have any gameplay effect. We need to get some more xenomorphs in there, I think, as well. There are some nice ones. There are some nice concrete numbering ones as well. So again, it's just a case of flicking through to try and find
those numbering ones are handy for those of you who are building large drop ports and air bases, because those are runway end numbers. That's what they're particularly useful for. There's another combination, which is there are a couple of types of fluff that are only visible when you combine them with another terrain type, in the same way that Road Fluff 1 turns an existing corner into a bend. If you combine light woods with, I think it's Fluff 12 from memory, it turns it into an orchard.
That's interesting. So
which is one I've used quite a lot on my maps.
Try and overlay that. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, there you go.
So
again, it still counts as light woods from a game point of view. It just looks slightly different. For those of you who like to have neatly arranged orchards or avenues of trees alongside the roads, and that one actually has a game effect because it's still light woods under the fluff.
I remember that one. So that's all of the basic train types, and I thought I'd just flick through the menu just to talk about a few more that we're not going to demonstrate.
One thing that's worth doing, just to jump back to the fluff, one thing that's really worth doing is, because there are so many kinds of fluff, if you find one you like, I recommend creating a text document or similar and making a note of it, like the orchards one, because otherwise what happens is you'll spend about half an hour scrolling through all the options trying to find that one you were looking for. So if there are ones like the helipads that you like, remember the numbers or make a note of them. I make a note because I can't remember them.
Hopefully someone will make a list at some point. There's a lot more little terrain types here. So we've got arms, which don't do anything, which just add battle mech arms. You can change the number of arms that are there. So you have this pile of arms. We've done bridges, we've done building armor and building types. Cliff top is really good because it enables you to turn any elevation into the cliff top rules, which means you have to make a piloting skill roll if you're going up or down them. Elevator, never used.
They also make cliff top rules. Cliff tops also enable you to make a level 1 elevation change impassable to vehicles. So it's useful. It's useful for things like if you want to build a railway cutting or a road embankment or something like that, or if you just want some kind of sort of embankment that vehicles can't cross, but the mechs can still see over. Cliff top applies the sheer cliffs rule. from TAC Ops.
Elevator I've never personally used. Fire is...
Elevator gets used. There's a couple of maps that are in the distro for Solaris 7, because there are a couple of the arenas from Solaris that use elevators. And it's a slightly complex thing that you have to set the settings for. And they tend to operate, I think they operate randomly and just pop up and down. They're mostly used for arena type games to add a bit of spice to them. But that's not usually found on an open battlefield.
Fire is really useful because fire enables you to just to set things on fire. You can set any hex on fire, which is not entirely true in TAC Ops, but you can set buildings on fire or you can set woods on fire. And again, it's an overlay. Fluff is the one that we've just talked about with categories. Fortified, not entirely sure what that hex does actually. Fortified is
the infantry position one.
Yeah,
it basically fortified type 1 will apply an improved position. It's effectively it's another one where the terminology doesn't quite tally with what's used in TAC Ops at the moment, but an improved position is effectively a pre-dug infantry position, which will give infantry makes them a +1 harder to be hit. It stops them suffering the open infantry caught in the open damage multiplier, and you can also put a vehicle hull down in it. We discovered earlier today.
Yeah, we were doing that for one of the campaign. We just discovered that. So normally vehicles can't go hull down unless they've got half hexes, which MegaMek doesn't do. So you can actually put some improved positions there. Fuel tank we've done. Geyser is, again, it's in TAC Ops, but it's just, as described, it can just jet out randomly, things that increase heat. Heavy industry, again, is just a terrain type that's more difficult to pass and affects scanners. Ice we've done.
And may explode.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't know that one. Go on.
Yeah, heavy industrial hexes, if you have a target standing in one and the shot misses, there is a risk of explosion. So if you like putting heavy industrial hexes under normal rules, don't think it's validated, but under TAC Ops rules, they should be within 3 hexes of a building. Put them next to some fuel tanks and enjoy the show.
And you can overlay it on top of buildings, can't you? Heavy industrial.
I believe so. I'm not sure. I've not tried that.
So ice we've done. Impassable is useful if you're going to create caves. So caves are very difficult to create in MegaMek, but if you set terrain height as 9 and impassable, it basically makes you make cave walls. The only time it doesn't work is if you basically if you fire LRMs over the top of them, which still works. But that's the best hope you've got of making a cave. Jungle we've looked at. Legs is the same as arms, but on the bottom. But you just put random there, didn't do anything. Metal deposits affects mag scan. So if you stick metal deposits in hills, they affect mag scan. Again, that's quite a complicated one, but does that. Mud we've done, which is just making it gets you to make PSRs or get stuck. Planted fields is a really nice one. Again, they're in TAC Ops where you just have these fields of corn which block line of... They're very tall fields of corn, but they're
level 1.
Yeah. And they block... they still... I think the implementation of this might be wrong, but we've been finding they've still been blocking line of sight. I'll have to do some testing on that.
They're supposed to work. They work supposed to work, I think, similarly to light woods, where a certain number of them block line of sight. Yeah. But the height calculation may be off.
I think at the moment they're set height 2 when they should be height 1. But you can get bogged down in them as well if they're planted fields. So pavement we've done, planted fields we've done, rapids we've done, road fluff, rough, which is different to rubble, because rubble you have to make the PSR. So rubble is like dead buildings rather than just rocky terrain. Sand you can get stuck in, which is nice if you're doing little beaches, or basically you have to make a PSR roll or get stuck. Screen, I've never worked out what screen is. Smoke, you can just add smoke to the map, although it will dissipate over time once you start playing. Snow we've done, where you've got thin snow. Space I wouldn't go near. I've just been trying to create maps in space, but it's not entirely supported by MegaMek. because the 0G kind of, there's no way to set 0G in MegaMek, and there's no way to do jump jet movement in MegaMek like with elementals.
Yeah,
But
I think that may have been a tile type just designed for being, which they included in order to be able to make the space maps for the aerospace stuff.
But if you do add them, you can't land in them, so you can jump between structures, but you can't kind of fly through them. Swamp, we've done.
Swamp, like sticky mud you can sink in.
Tundra is again another one you get bogged down in. We've done woods, and that's it. So that's all of our terrain types. And again, we won't go through all of these, but there are tons of maps that you can look at. And I think there's a couple of features here just to show you what to do once you've made your map. Is you can just save it. You can also save it as an image, which will save it as a bitmap, not a bitmap, a PNG file.
PNG, yeah.
Which is useful if you want to basically then put that into your campaign document or a scenario document and say this is.
It's handy for showing other people without requiring them to fire up MegaMek to have a look at the map.
Resize map is really useful. So if you do start making a map and then think I want to create a map that's bigger, or I want to take a bigger map and create it smaller, you hit resize map. You make sure everything's at none if you want it just to spawn new map, and you just put the number of hexes north, south, east, and west you want to add. But you can also put a minus number, so it will cut. It will
crop the map.
Yeah, which is quite useful if you want to crop a map down. There's no way in the MegaMek map editor to add two maps together, which I'll show you in a minute. There is a way to do it, but there's no way to do it in this. Validate's worth hitting at the end, although it does it automatically. The only time things go wrong in MegaMek, in map editor, is when people put buildings and then start doing the manual exits for buildings, which can create problems. Usually the exits are done all automatically. But if you have a building that's open on one end, it will be invalid. So that's the main cause of invalid maps is buildings that have got a edge that's not defined. So that's that. So I think I'm going to just save this, and I might put it onto the. You can create folders, of course, in the map editor. One of the annoying things about the map, you can't browse outside of MegaMek folders for maps. So if you want a map, you've got to put it inside the MegaMek folders to be able to find it. And they create a file called .board.
Map editor can find maps outside the MegaMek folders, but MegaMek can't.
MegaMek can't. Yeah.
So you can save your maps using this. You can save your maps anywhere on the computer. The problem is that you then can't find it in MegaMek. Good practice is, as ever, when you're naming your map, standard MegaMek practice is to name the map starting with the size of the map. So this would be 32 by 17 River Valley or something like that.
Yeah, it's always a good idea, because when you're searching for maps, you can only search from within a particular dimensions.
Yeah, in MegaMek's lobby, when you as Stuart says, when you're trying to find a map, you need to specify the size first. Whereas in the map editor, you can just, if you go for open a new map, you can sort of search and find anything anywhere. Maps go in the data/boards folder. It's usually a good idea, if you're going to start making your own, to create a subfolder into which you can put all of your own maps, because that way you can then just copy that folder when you update to the next version of MegaMek. You can copy that folder of your maps and put it in your new version of MegaMek.
So I think there's only one thing I wanted to show now, and this is a bit more complicated. I just wanted to show this idea of creating a map and then saving it in MegaMek. So if I quit the map editor, and helpfully it will tell you if you haven't saved something.
Otters, excellent.
Yeah, I love otters. They're from Wingham Wildlife Park in Kent. So I'm just going to click start a new game, and
I've got an idea for a pair of maps that can be put together.
Ah, good.
Because of
So
course I have.
here we go. So we're in the standard MegaMek interface, and we're going to go to select map.
Map.
And now, when you're searching for maps, so I can actually find that map I've just made, but I can only find it if I go to 32 by 17. And there are only certain categories here, so I think if you create maps that aren't in these categories, you can't find them.
And no, it will create new categories.
That's good.
It scans the map repository and will produce the list in the drop down is based on the maps that are available to you.
If you
maps
forget,
that exist.
and if you forget to copy and paste your map in, you can actually do it in the middle of the game. So not in the middle of the game, but after launching MegaMek, you can drag and drop it across.
Yeah.
So I've got.
I know this to be true because I accidentally created a map with dimensions different to what I thought I was doing, and then still managed to find it in the drop down because it was the only one with that stupid size.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to 16 by 17. I'm not going to talk through selecting maps in MegaMek, but I just wanted to show you this. So we're going to select the basic map type. There you go. And we're going to select the game board size, and we're going to do side-by-side map. So we're going to take two 16 by 17 maps, and we're going to...
you want to click map size?
Yeah, it's not map. That's it, map size. There we go. View game board is just a preview.
Yeah. Again, the view game board has been improved since, for those of you who are used to the old version 46.1, it used to be that when you clicked view game board, you would get a larger mini map style artwork. Now, view game board does a proper rendering of the map, as you can see on Stuart's screen.
Yeah, the little preview isn't always how it looks. It just shows you the base color types.
The terrain, yeah.
Yeah.
And it
seems to be stuck for some reason. That's interesting. There you go. There's a bug for you. It's stuck in the game board.
It may be a Mac user bug.
There it is. It's just hidden the thing. Map dimensions. Yep. So board size. I can actually. This is a new feature actually. They've actually put the numbers here, or you can do map size in boards. So we can do 1 by 2. Is the first number horizontal? I think the first number is horizontal, isn't it?
I could never remember.
No, it must be. Yeah, the first number must be horizontal. Sorry, my computer's really slowed down. I think it must just be the recording software that's running in the background. So we're going to go by 2 by 1. So that should create 2 wide. Oh, it's created 14 by 1. Let's just type it in.
It's a long battle.
Yeah, that'll be very long.
One thing to remember when you're making maps is that if you're building large square maps like 32 by 34, it does mean that the time to contact in your battle is going to be expanded. 32 by 34 isn't that bad when you're dealing with mechs packing LRMs and that kind of thing. A 64 by 68 will take a little while of walking before anyone actually gets to shoot at anyone. But on the other hand, it does give you a reason to bring light mechs, because it means you can actually do proper encircling maneuvers and a proper battle of maneuver. And as Stuart has just discovered, the map size thing is the wrong way round.
It should be the other way around. It's like that didn't make sense. No, so the
counterintuitive.
Yeah, but it does give you a little preview of the way it's going to look.
On the left.
Yeah. Oh, there's some little delay going on here, so it's annoying. You might notice as well I'm using MegaMek on the Mac, which is great because I haven't been able to use MegaMek on the Mac for ages because it hadn't worked. But now with a little bit of and it does take a little bit of setup, you can get it to work on the map. So it just shows you roughly what it's going to look like. And now I can go and pick my 2 maps. So have you got 2 suggestions of 2 maps we want to put together?
I was going to be cheeky and choose some of mine, but let's go with some of the grasslands ones instead.
Yeah. So someone recreated the grassland maps here. One thing I'd like to say is that the person who did this needs to rename them what they're named in the actual maps. because it's a real pain. Because I've actually got
the person who did this didn't have access to the actual names on the actual maps when they did this. Speaking as the person that did this.
Oh, you did it, because I've actually got another set.
I did it
in my own file.
I think there was actually someone was going to go through them and rename them.
Yeah, because there are some missing as well. I think.
No, I think I had the full set, but I didn't have access to what they were actually called at the time. So yeah, because it was produced early.
Also, there's a thing called the moratorium, which means that no maps are added to MegaMek until they've been in circulation for 2 months.
Yeah, something like that.
So I think the Alien Vista one is going to be very difficult when that comes out eventually. Although that might be a while.
It's the same. MegaMek has the same principle with maps as it does with new mech designs, in that in order to give an opportunity for people to actually get hold of them from Catalyst before they find them in MegaMek, nothing is added into a release until after it's been available on the street for a while.
So, for instance, we did get the Worldwide Event 2020 maps made available to people on the demo team, but we weren't allowed to share them with other people. Only if we did it on the server. So once you've selected your 2 maps, you have to do something silly now. You just have to basically add a combat unit. Anything, just pick the first thing off the list, and make sure you haven't got victory conditions set to. Make sure you haven't got victory conditions set to automatic win, because otherwise, as soon as you start, it'll win.
Hello, you've won.
Again, apologies that my computer's slowed down a bit here. So you click on add a combat unit, you add in any combat unit you want, and then once you've added in a combat unit, you can launch into the game. And you don't actually have to play any of the game or anything, so I'm just going to click the first thing that comes up on this list here, because I had VTOLs selected. Again, it's chugging a bit. So once you've added it, and you just click on I'm done and launch into the game, it gives you the option of then saving board. And it might not let me get into it because I'm just having a few issues with things slowing down.
What will happen is that if once your computer starts letting you actually see the board, under the file menu, you've got a drop down which gives you the option of either of save board as image, which enables you to get a sort of snapshot of the battle, which is good if you're sort of sharing write-ups afterwards or embarrassing tales of your defeat, in my case. But there's also an option up there for file save board. And what that will do is save the entirety of the map that you've set up for the game, no matter how many map sheets you've put together to make it. This enables you to put together quite large maps out of the standard 16 by 17 sheets, and then save them for future use.
So there we go. I finally got a thing. And if I just click I'm done, it will launch into the game. You don't even have to launch into the game. You just get to this window here, and then you just go to File, and then Save Board. And then once you've saved that, you can have that double board, and then you can go back and edit it and add in extra bits of terrain, especially to try and join up the terrain to make it look more natural.
Yeah.
So, like if you wanted to recreate the, I think someone's already done this. I'm not sure. No, actually, I don't think they have yet. The battle mats aren't on there, I don't think. But you could have the battle mats there, which are recreated by like combining them or combine lots of maps. So I've combined like 6 maps together before, and then gone back to the map editor and just basically filled in the gaps. And you do save, you do board, and you do save as. You can also save an image if you wanted to, or with your units, but we're just doing the save as. And I won't show you it, but you can then just launch into MegaMek and then just open that. And it'll open it as the 32 by 17 board instead of 2 16 by 17s. So...
And that, as Stuart says, that's really useful for putting on things like roads, buildings, or indeed fuel tanks. for turning something that started out as just 2 standard maps into something sort of personalised for what you want.
So I don't feel you have to, you don't have to like start from scratch like we did there. You can just stick some maps that you roughly like, and then you can just go around altering them and adding some objectives in. Things that map editor doesn't do, which I think would be nice, is it doesn't allow you to label anything, which I think is a great feature if they could do that, or to prescribe deployment zones. Sometimes I might describe deployment zones by changing colour. Or if we're doing a capture the area where they have to move in an area, I might use a slightly different tile colour set, like use the desert for the middle. And
I think part of the reason for that is because the idea is that once a board is created, it can be used for any battle. But yes, so that kind of functionality would be useful to enable more of a scenario writing function. I do know that there is a request currently up in MegaMek for variable depth deployment zones rather than the standard 3 hex, which will give a bit more flexibility.
Or even if they ever could crack being able to walk onto the map, that'd be nice. But that's quite tricky.
Walking onto the map is actually harder than variable depth.
Yeah.
Because it would mean you need to deploy your mechs in a space that doesn't exist.
Yeah, you'd have to create a 1 hex edge all the way around the map
0.
that was basically off. You couldn't see
tabletop.
Yeah. So I think that's more or less it. Oh, and you can't do minefields or anything. So if you're wondering how you do minefields and everything like that, they have to be done inside MegaMek, and you can do that in a different way. But there's no way of pre-doing that in the game. But in the same way, once you're in MegaMek, you obviously can't change buildings or anything. So all that's done in a map editor.
Yeah, you do buildings in the map editor. Turrets you would turrets you can't add in the map editor because they're a unit. So those would be added in MegaMek for the specific battle you intend to fight.
Brilliant. I think we'll move to the end there and we'll wrap that up. Is there anything more you'd like to say about map editing in the last couple of minutes? We've gone on for a little while, but obviously you don't have to listen to... We've put the easy stuff at the beginning and done the more complicated stuff at the end.
Yeah. That's pretty much, I think, covers all of it. It's basically, just at the start, work out what kind of map you're aiming for. Although, admittedly, just doodling around with map editor and making something interesting is also fun. And keep in mind, as Stuart mentioned a couple of times, you need to keep in mind issues regarding line of sight. So if you want to have mechs to be hiding behind stuff, it needs to be at least 2 levels tall. And that goes for buildings and hills. And also keep in mind the movement modifiers that you're going to get from the different terrain you're using. So if you've got a map that's entirely covered in heavy woods, it'll take weeks for anyone to even get anywhere near the enemy, and they won't see them even when they do.
Yeah, and they'll have to be within 2 hexes to see them. There's actually been paper maps that have been done like that.
Yep. And I've done some in MegaMek.
Very, very, very hard to play on. And it depends on what you want to do, doesn't it? But again, good gameplay experience is for basic maps is a good thing to consider when you're building them, and then just have fun with the scenarios. When they first came out, I completely built the Fortress one. What's it called? Forward base map, which is quite interesting to do with the walls and different things. Walls is one, by the way, that isn't supported in MegaMek. There isn't a walls.
They don't. Option. That's because walls don't exist in BattleTech.
Yeah, the wall option in TAC is bizarre. The way it follows the hex edge. So if you want to create walls in MegaMek, just use level 2 buildings, which are
or you can use level 2 terrain. Which is the one I tend to use because buildings infantry walk through, and I don't like infantry walking through my walls.
Yeah, I suppose that's a problem. Actually, I've never considered that. Maybe that'd be a category they can add. Adding walls, so you can't enter them, so they're solid.
I think the thing is that as you mentioned, the walls that you can see on some of the map sheets don't actually have a rule for them
No.
in BattleTech. So because MegaMek have now decided they're not going to be doing any more unofficial or custom rules, because they've got their hands full with all the actual rules that exist, and the steady stream of errata we keep generating. So I suspect until we get an official rule for single hex size walls, we're not going to have a MegaMek implementation of them. But in the meantime, as Stuart says, you can use buildings instead to create that wall effect, and stop vehicles just driving haphazardly across your landscape.
I think that happened particularly in the forward base map
Mm.
when you were trying to recreate that. Because even the funny thing is, even that as a map sheet didn't follow the rules in TAC Ops. Because the rules in TAC Ops say that hexes follow hex edges, which is
Yeah.
bizarre anyway. So I actually prefer just creating its buildings. But obviously, you don't want the infantry to walk into a building. But there's a lot to be said about playing fluffy. So when you're playing in MegaMek, you can just decide between yourself and say, oh, by the way, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't enter those buildings.
You can't enter those buildings, exactly,
because they're locked or something.
Yeah, the walls in MegaMek are designed to replicate more of a sort of a concrete and steel border wall type thing, rather than a huge fortification as seen on those map sheets, which is 30 meters thick and however many levels high. So the TAC Ops rules are just designed to be that concrete wall that's blocking line of sight at the end of the road, but which your Warhammer is going to walk through with no trouble.
So what we're saying is MegaMek needs to include an extra setting called a Trump War.
I was trying to avoid using. That's exactly what I was trying very hard not to say. But yes, that's pretty. The TAC Ops wall is that wall that they're going to make the Mareks pay for.
Yes,
And
definitely.
and as yet it isn't a MegaMek because it would be a hex edge implementation. But now that they've implemented hex edge stuff for things like sheer cliffs, that does raise the possibility that someday there may be fences and walls, which means I can finally get around to building the prison break map I've been planning for ages.
And you have to kind of look carefully, Matt. We did have a player who, in a recent game, walked his Dashi, he's a direwolf, off a cliff edge and embarrassed the True-Born pilot by planting his face in the ground. And he said, "Oh, I didn't realise that was a cliff edge," because it doesn't actually tell you; it just lets you walk off.
Yeah. One of the advantages of version 47.14 it came out is with the new shadow edging on hex changes. It makes it a lot more obvious where hex elevation changes, and when it's a height 3 or more, so that you can't just step off it, it does actually have sort of a little scree edge to it to make it even more visually obvious if you are zoomed in far enough to be able to see that. It's a nice little art touch they've added.
Yeah, that's certainly a different. If you go to File and Client Settings, you can change your graphic view, and that enables you to see the shadow, which I've got enabled at the moment, which is very useful for defining edges and seeing things there.
Yeah.
All right, we'll call that a day then, and thank you for helping out. And any help, just go and head up to the. You can see there's the menu. Map editors down there. Just go along to the MegaMek Facebook forum. There is a couple of Discord servers as well that you can ask questions, or just pop onto my Facebook page, which is Strategos Level 3, and just ask a question.
And there is also obviously the main BattleTech forum itself on which I've completely forgotten.
bg.battletech.com.
That's the one.
Yep. Which is quite good.
Some of the developers from MegaMek are on there. And if you have any issues with MegaMek or you find bugs, either with the map editor or with anything else, you can either mention them on the forum or elsewhere where there's one of the developers around, or there is the MegaMek GitHub where you can go, and if you use GitHub, you can go and report faults there as well, and that means that they stay on the developers' radar, because until they tick them off as done, they will remain on the list. So it's quite useful if you do find any errors, because it means that they will get fixed at some point.
Yeah, it's worth doing. I mean, I just did one about Arrow 4 because Arrow 4 doesn't work properly in MegaMek.
Mm.
It was when hitting a hex was causing 20 damage instead of 5 to all of the elementals with homing missiles. So it's worth filing it, and they're very good at checking the rules and then telling you, no, you're an idiot, you should go away and read the rule book, which they didn't say to me because they're nice, because I was right. Which I took great delight in telling the players.
They are the devs are generally friendly, unless you're it's being sort of particularly spiteful, telling them
why does it cost 1 movement point to move forward? Ask them a silly question.
Yeah. If you ask them stuff that's in the books, they will tell you to go and read the book, but that's entirely fair. If you are having a go and telling them that the thing they've been working on for the last 10 years or more is bad because X or Y, you may get short shrift. But generally speaking, actually, they want this to be as good as possible, and so they want to hear how people are using it and what issues they found with it.
I should have done this at the beginning, but I have to say a big shout out to all of the MegaMek developers team. This is solely a fan-based product that's been going for, I don't know how many years now, but over 10, 15 years.
About 20 years,
20
I think
years,
it is now.
yeah. And it is solely, there's no official links between MegaMek and Catalyst as far as being part of the business. There are unofficial links in much in the same way as there is with Sana. And
unofficial links because they all play the game.
Yeah, and I know after what one of the Catalyst developers writers told me that they often mock up maps in MegaMek in the map editor before they then send them to the artist to actually do in an art form. So it's a very useful tool, and we also know that when people are designing mechs for TROs, they often do them in MegaMek lab. So it's a great resource, and kudos to all those people that have worked so hard on it and supporting it and giving us obsessive compulsive something to endlessly do and creating more maps. So on that note,
I spend more time making maps than I do fighting on them. I think I need to fix that.
It is enjoyable, since I've just recreated every map that we need for the Battle of 2 Kid Online, which some of them were cheats, some of them were just sticking 2 maps together, some of them were very bespoke, like recreating the Inju Mountain Pass, which was quite fun, and hopefully there are a lot of fan-based ones. If you go onto the maps and you can see people's different ideas about what they do and just experiment. Okay, until our next tutorial, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from him.
It's goodbye from me.
Yeah. Bye. British humour. Can't beat it.